Hey, good afternoon, everyone. It is Wednesday, March 24th, and I'm excited to welcome you to the Better Together Facebook Live. I'm Barb, your host of Better Together, and this is my weekly Facebook Live show where we get together, we talk about all the things. And so if this is your first time on Better Together, I am so thrilled that you are here. I'm excited because I am joined by my fabulous producer, Tabitha Allman. Tabitha, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Barb. I was just thinking earlier today, when I signed up to be your producer, I never imagined I'd be in front of the camera so many times. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited.
Well, if you are just joining us, audience, I am excited for you to hang out with me and Tabitha. And as Tabitha said, she is my fabulous producer. But one of the reasons why I wanted Tabitha to join me is because she is a part of that next generation of incredibly talented leaders who have a voice and lots of amazing things to say. And so today, I'm going to be the old lady talking, and she's going to be the fresh voice. And we're going to talk about pandemic fatigue. And so if you are joining us, whether live or on the replay, go ahead and say hi in the comments. We would love to hear from you. Tell us how you're doing, because we are now at the 1-year anniversary. And depending on where you live in the country, you know that we're in a pandemic, but it just doesn't seem like it has as much impact on your life. Yet, the weight, the residual, kind of the leftover side effects of the pandemic are still reverberating in our lives. And so Tabitha and I today, we're going to talk about 3 things that both she and I realized that are important for us to remember when it comes to dealing with the pandemic. So let's start with a question, audience. If you've been watching the show, we come live every Tuesday. We love hearing from the audience. So Tabitha, what is our audience question today? Tell us about it.
Yeah, so the question for today is, what has been the hardest part about the pandemic for you? And we gave you several options. So A, is it the death and grief? B, financial impact? C, family stress, so homeschooling, job changes? Or D, all of the above? So feel free to drop your answers in the comments, and we'd love to hear what's been the hardest part for you.
Well, Tabitha, as the audience is dropping in their comments and sharing part of their experience. So right now we're in 2021, but when you think back on 2020, it was not the year that you expected it to be. So our audience may not know this about you, but you're Canadian and you were in the US at the time of things were starting. So tell us what happened.
Yeah, well, the beginning of 2020 looked very different than how it looks now. I had gone to, I was like, did Barb disappear? Okay. I had been going to a school in Illinois for 5 years. So from 2015 to 2020, I was getting my bachelor's. And then after that, I kind of nailed my dream job out of college. I was working at the Chamber of Commerce in my area as a marketing and PR assistant. And then I remember March 18th hit, and we got news that the first person in our area had just gotten COVID, which was so freaky at the moment. And we were listening to the news, and they were starting to close the borders between Canada and the US. And our prime minister basically said, Canadians, it's time for you to come home. And so on that day, I really had to make a really hard decision to move back to Canada. And so I was telling Barb, in a matter of 36 hours, my life completely changed. I went from having this great job, kind of having this set course in my life, to moving home 36 hours later, packing everything I could into one suitcase, leaving the rest in the US, and being jobless and living with my parents again after 5.5 years, and being in isolation, which just added insult to injury. I was alone for 2 weeks. So this whole season really taught me what it means in the Bible when it says that, like, we make our plans, but the Lord has the ultimate say, because in a matter of 36 hours, everything changed for me. So
Yes,
Yeah.
that qualifies as a lot of changes, and so we've got some folks who have chimed in, and so let's see who is talking about the pandemic. So Kelly, hi Kelly, thank you for joining us. She said, "I think having everyone home all the time. I love people, especially my family, but simple tasks like cleaning my home are much harder with little kids." Yes. Those are little kids, but I'm grateful for our health, my husband's job, and good work to do each day. I love that. Tabitha, do we have anyone else who's jumped in? Oh,
That's
Kelly,
it for today. Mhm.
that is so good. Well, Tabitha, I appreciate you sharing your story because you really highlight how radically things have changed, and some of those changes really they really put some stress on your life, and then it got harder because you had to live in those changes. And so today, if you're just joining us, whether you're watching live or on the replay, my fabulous producer, Tabitha, and I are talking about overcoming pandemic fatigue. And some of you may have never heard the term before. So, Tabitha, what is pandemic fatigue?
Yeah, so pandemic fatigue is the mental and physical tiredness as a result of navigating COVID's constant change and uncertainty. And as I mentioned in my life, it's kind of been a roller coaster, and I'm sure many people who are watching have felt the same way.
Oh, truly. And that's why we Tabitha and I were talking about what we wanted to do as a show. And even though it's been a year since the dramatic stay at home, and it's been a year since many of us have done shutdowns, we still are all carrying the weight of the pandemic. We're all still navigating some of the question marks that are out there, even though there is a vaccine. And we wanted to address pandemic fatigue because it may, for some of you, finally have a label to just that weight that you've been feeling every day when you watch the news, the weight of all the decisions that you have to make. Because when we don't know exactly what we're dealing with, we can get really negative. We can get apathetic. There can be a lot of fear or carelessness. And so, Tabitha, for you, pandemic fatigue, that is something where for you that really has been real because your living situation has changed so many times. So even now, like you're still dealing with the weight of pandemic related decisions.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Well, actually, before I do that, I just want to pop up this comment because my mom, and she says, I miss being able to be with my kids and grandkids because we can't travel. And that's like the perfect segue into my story because even though I moved home in March, in November, my eldest sister sent me a message. They were going through some job transitions, and she's like, Tabitha, can you just come and stay with me for a month and help me take care of my kids? She has 5 kids, or not 5 kids, whoa, 3 kids, 5 and under. And I was like, sure, I'm single, I work from home, so I don't really have a lot of things keeping me in one location. And so the plan was to just go there. She lives 5 hours from me, for a month. So until, after Christmas, stay there for New Year's a little bit and then come home. And well, I'm still here because with COVID, it's just constant uncertainty. And the day after Christmas, we went into lockdown. And until now, some areas of Ontario where I live is still in lockdown. And so they don't want us to travel. So yeah, just I thought that one move was big, but then now I have another move now where I'm navigating more uncertainty. And so it feels like the uncertainty never really ends.
Truly. And that is why we wanted to talk about overcoming pandemic fatigue, because even now, even though it seems like things are getting better, we still feel the weight of pandemic related decisions. I mean, for you, you mentioned that your family in Canada, there are certain areas that are on lockdown until the end of April. That's just wow. And so we've got some folks that are chiming in, and Annie McLean says hi, and Tabitha. Sherry Lynn, my friend Sherry, she's a mental health professional. She said Zoom fatigue is also a real thing.
Yeah.
Isn't that the truth? Who else has chimed in, Tabitha?
Yeah, we have Kelly here, and I'll pop it up. Oh, it covers our faces. But she says,
Yeah.
my 19-year-old niece had to fly to Kenya, made it with 40 minutes to spare before the border closed to be with her family. Oh my goodness. My brother is
Wow.
teaching over there right now. It's been so hard for them socially because they miss their friends and they've changed schools during the pandemic. Yeah, just so many people who have stories so similar of like, the last minute flights before borders closed and being separated from family. It's really such a hard season for so many of us.
It has. So, audience, we've got a question for you because we're going to move into three things that I believe are going to be so helpful for all of us as we are really trying to finish strong in this next stage of the pandemic. But right now, you're welcome to be honest with us. How would you rate your level of pandemic fatigue? A, extreme, B, pretty high, C, I'm doing okay, D, not affected very much. All right, Tabitha, how about you? How would you rate your level of pandemic fatigue?
Honestly, I feel like it varies according to the day sometimes. Right now, I'd say I'm doing okay. A couple days ago, probably pretty high. And so I think it's okay too if people's answers really vary according to the day because it's tough.
Yeah, I'd have to say, I hang out around C
Hmm.
because things my stage of life, it's really a friendlier stage of life for the pandemic. My kids were adults. I generally worked at home anyways.
Hmm.
However, for me, one of the things that the pandemic really made tough was just loneliness. I mean, I'm a single empty nester.
Hmm.
And those early stay at home. But even now, what gives me fatigue is the fact that there is a little bit of opportunity to get out and to see people, but there's very limited things that we can do. And
Right.
we're all trying to negotiate what's safe and what's not safe. And that can be exhausting. Oh, so we've got some comments that have come in. Anything that we can pop up on the screen?
Well, Missy just
And
said hi. And so, Missy, thanks for joining the conversation.
thanks, Missy. So glad. Well, Tabitha, let's talk about these three things that are really helpful in navigating the pandemic. And so, the first thing that we came up with, number one, is that you are doing the best that you can. And this is for me, like I say this to myself all of the time because for me, pandemic fatigue, I equate it to being like a cell phone battery. We know that when cell phones are older, they are not as efficient. They do not hold a charge like they did when the cell phone was fresh. So for me in the pandemic last year, I gave myself permission to say, Barb, on my best days, I'm only going to be 80% because 20% of my brain is always going to be calculating everything that has to do with the pandemic. I'm either going to be taking in the news, I'm going to be making decisions about things, I'm going to be wrestling with fears and worries and fighting those in Jesus' name. But 20% of my brain is going to deal with the pandemic. And so I realized that the friendliest thing I could do for myself was to make a list of everything I'd need to do on any given day. And then I needed to cross off three things off that list because I knew that I wouldn't have the energy to do it all. And
Mhm.
because I was doing the best that I could. And so I had to get really strategic about looking at everything I had to do and going, there are some important things I'm just not going to get done today. Tabitha, how does this look for you? How do you live out that you're doing the best that you can?
Yeah. Well, just being on social media, I feel like I saw these two extremes. Like, there were those people who were like, during this pandemic, you have more time than ever before to get everything done. And so, no excuses. So, that was one extreme. And the other extreme was like, this is so hard. We've never been through this before. So, it's okay if you just want to lay in your bed, watch Netflix, and eat corn pops. And so, there's like these two extremes. And like, it was kind of this tension because some people were saying, like, you should be accomplishing everything. And other people were like, you don't need to accomplish anything. And I have found for myself that somewhere in the middle is the healthiest place to be. Like, I don't believe that 2020, 2021 are like a complete waste of time. Like, I believe there are ways that we can still be investing and pouring into people and growing personally and investing in our personal development. But at the same time, we need to recognize that some days we just don't have it. And so it's okay to rest, to relax, to not do anything. And so just taking those two extremes and falling somewhere in the middle has been helpful for me. And just one other thing is that this is the year that I've really invested in personal development more than ever before. And so, you know, like signing up for mentorship courses. I was telling my mom, I recently started an online counseling course just to walk through like struggles, you know? And so it's okay to really pour into yourself and grow in this season as well.
Beautiful. Lovely. I thank you for that. And so everyone who's listening, number one, the encouragement you want to share with you is for you to remind yourself that you're doing the best that you can. Now, we had some ladies who did jump in and share some comments back when we were talking about what's been tough about the pandemic fatigue. Anita Billion said she was B. She wants to snuggle with her great grandbabies. So we just love that, Anita. And Amy Dossie said C. She said that she's doing okay, but there are definitely days where I can tell it's harder. She says, I don't like being in front of large crowds, especially if I know them. She says she misses being at church every Sunday, but she's been watching online. And then Sherry says, the to-do list, decrease the expectations of yourself. All so very good. Thank you for jumping in. Now, number two, this is a big one. Tabitha and I, we were talking about the number two thing, and this is really the number one thing that drains most of our energy is when we take things personally. So a Q-tip for me is the reminder that everyone is an iceberg. What we see from people is not everything that's going on in their lives. And in the pandemic, we all have a ton of things going on. So for me, part of what helps me not get tired is not making assumptions about how other people are behaving and in thinking it has anything to do with me. I assume everyone's an iceberg, that what I can see isn't the whole story. So if somebody is rude, if someone is struggling, if someone is saying, if they are just not behaving well at all, I just say, I'm not going to take that personally. I'm going to quit taking it personally because I am not responsible for their response. So that's me. Tabitha, where does Q-tip help you deal with pandemic fatigue?
Yeah, well, working online, I spend a lot of my time on the computer. And this phrase keeps coming to my mind, and it's err on the side of grace. And so, you know, say someone's being a little bit snippy online, or they haven't responded to you in 2 weeks. You know, it's easy to assume like they just don't care, or they're not taking their job seriously, or they're angry at me. You know, we can make all these assumptions about people, but when I say err on the side of grace, it's like just extend grace, because especially in this season, we really don't know what people are walking through, whether they're sick, whether they have a loved one who is struggling, whether they're just exhausted. I know for myself, there are some messages I still need to respond to, and it's, you know, not because I don't care. It's just like there are so many things going on. And so to really just extend grace to other people has been a big one for me.
And this one is such a huge one because people are often what can drain us very quickly. And so I love the fact that you're like, yeah, I mean, you are responsible, you are loving, you are hardworking. But yeah, you're like, I can't get to all the messages. Sometimes I just don't have it in me. And you don't want the people who you haven't returned the message to take it personally. It has nothing to do with them. It has to do with you. Yeah. And I remind myself of the same thing, that right where I know that I'm not always handling things great at the moment. And so I can't expect others, but I also do not have to carry the weight of whatever their problems are. If somebody has a problem, that's their problem. And I don't have to accept whatever the bad vibes they are sending towards me. I'm like, we're going to Q-tip that and move on. So do we have any comments of ladies who are chiming in on that?
Yeah, Missy here again. She said, hardest part is not seeing family and not being able to worship together. They have variants of the virus right now, so who really knows? She also said to remember to give and receive grace, which is, yeah, exactly what we've been talking about. It's a really good one.
Beautiful. Well, the last thing for overcoming pandemic fatigue, and I'm talking with my fabulous producer, Tabitha Allman, and Tabitha, small practices make a big difference. That's the last thing. And both you and I, as we were brainstorming the show, we both, when we thought about small practices, we came up with the same word. And what word is that?
Gratitude. Yeah.
Why is gratitude a small practice that makes a big difference for you?
One of the biggest changes in my life that this pandemic has brought about, apart from being, shipped across the country, is is just being thankful for things that I used to take for granted. Waking up in the morning, my health, my family, community. I remember on New Year's Eve, I was like, I have never been so thankful to make it to another year. And like, it's just, with so much going on and, so many hard things that we're walking through, just practicing gratitude and being thankful for the little things that are really actually not that little has been really important.
Beautiful. And for you, particularly because like you've been living away from, you moved back to your parents, but I mean, you've been living without your own place to call home since November. I mean, this has really been this has been a rough season. And so on those hard days, how do you begin to even access gratitude? Because you're just like, are you kidding me? Like, this is not going to end anytime soon. How do you turn that around?
Yeah, it's not always easy. I think one day at a time has been a big phrase in my mind as well. I'm a huge planner, so I love to plan like all this time. But I've realized I really can't plan. Like, we make plans and then they fail. And so just taking things one day at a time. Also, like when it comes to dealing with like fear and anxiety, one practical thing is I just have what I call an anxiety playlist. And so it just has really encouraging worship songs that kind of help me through when I'm feeling really anxious. And so whether that's during the day or at night, I'll put on that playlist and just, focus on the Lord. So that's been helpful for me too.
Oh, that is so good. An anxiety playlist. I feel like that is a brilliant idea, and that is so practical. I love that. Speaking of practical, this was something that really was practical and so helpful. This is a 2-quart jar, and became my gratitude jar. I took little small sheets of paper, and this is something that you can do with it doesn't matter if you're married, single again, with or without kids. But I got some old scrap paper and I cut them into these little squares this big. And I put this empty jar. I got it at the Dollar General for $3. But I put this jar in the center of my dining room table because I knew that I would be eating at that table every day. And I put this stack of papers there. And I wrote down 1 or 2 things every single day that I saw as a blessing from God. And I folded them up, and I did it for 3 months. So I usually did like 2 a day or 3 a day. And then I shoved them all into this jar. And what it did was help me each day to be absolutely mindful, intentionally mindful that I was not alone, that God was taking care of me, that I had things in my life to be grateful for, and I made it tangible. One of the things that I did, and this was inspired by my surrendered Bible study, but I grabbed this pretty box also from the Dollar General. I think it was $5. And I decided that I would make a time capsule. So for anyone out there, you can actually do it. As they said, this has been an unprecedented time. Well, I wanted to capture memories of this unprecedented time. And what better way to do it than show gratitude? So I filled this little box with some pretty crinkly paper, and I dropped this jar into the box and put a lid on it. And this is actually now a time capsule that sits in my office on a shelf. And a few years from now, I'm going to open it up and I get a chance to read back through. And I think this would be a great activity for couples, for families, for parents to do with their family a few years from now. So that's my practical there. What do you think about that, Tabitha?
That's awesome. And Kelly just said that these would be great to do with her kids. They struggle with being positive as the pandemic stretches on. They miss their friends and family. And she feels like she's always trying to spin the positive. So this would really help.
I love that. Well, and Tabitha, I don't know if you have that anxiety playlist that I don't know if that's anything that's shareable, but if you wanted to, it'd be great to throw that in the comments. But we would love to hear from the audience as we are getting to the end of today's show. Tabitha, what is it that we want to know from our audience?
Yeah, so our last question is just, what are some of your takeaways from today's show? So feel free to share anything that's been helpful for you over the past half an hour as we've been chatting. We'd love to hear from you.
And so Tabitha, as the audience is thinking through for them what some of their takeaways are, as you think about the pandemic and everything that you've been through, what are some of the things that maybe one or two things that you've experienced because of the pandemic that you would have not experienced any other way?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think just the power of the presence of God. I actually recently just wrote a post about this, how like the presence of God looked different ways in different seasons. Sometimes it looked like him granting me peace in the middle of a really hard situation, when I was packing my bags and moving back home. But sometimes his presence just looked like family or friends sending me encouraging messages or quality time with my sisters. And so, first of all, the presence of God is a beautiful thing, but also like never underestimate the power that like sending a text message to someone can have. Just saying like, hey, I hope you're doing well. I've been thinking about you. And especially to those friends who like generally seem like the really strong ones, the chances are they're carrying a lot of people's burdens too. And so just being there for your strong friends is a really great way to be an encouragement.
That's beautiful.
One of the biggest things.
I love that. There have been some notes over on my regular page. Let's see, Anita Billion, she talked about how she loves the anxiety playlist. Amy Dossie wrote in all caps, yes, she would love to see your anxiety playlist, all caps. And for her, one of the takeaways for her was grace, giving it and receiving it because we're all in it together. So that's lovely. Do we have any other comments to share about takeaways from today's show?
Yeah, well, my mom said the importance of gratitude really stood out to her a lot too. So thanks, Mom, for watching.
Yes, Monica, I love that you are here and your daughter is absolutely fabulous. Anita talked about how a text or a phone call does mean so much. And Tabitha, I love how you highlighted that, yes, the strong friends out there are probably providing a lot of support for a lot of people. So it's good to check on your strong friends. So that's beautiful. Oh, well, this has been such a great conversation, Tabitha. Thank you so much. And if you've been watching us today, I hope you've been encouraged as we've talked about the 3 ways to overcome pandemic fatigue, because this has been a very long season and we still have a little ways to go. And so number 1, if we can put them back on the screen, Tabitha, number 1, we want you to remember that you are doing the best that you can. Even on the days when you get 0 done, that's okay. You're still doing the best you can. Tabitha, what's number 2?
Yeah, number 2 is Q-tips. So quit taking it personally and err on the side of grace.
Lovely. And Tabitha, roll us on in there with number 3.
Number 3 is that small practices make a big difference. And we talked today a lot about the power of gratitude.
Beautiful. Well, one last thing I want to share as we wrap up the show. If you love this episode, we would love for you to share it with your friends. Every week, I am on my author page with the Better Together show at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time now. And you can catch the previous episodes at barbruce.com on the blog page. And in just a couple of weeks, I will be celebrating the release of my newest project, which is titled Breakthrough, Finding Freedom in Christ. Here's the beautiful cover. And this is a 6-week Bible study on the book of Galatians. And if you grew up in the church and you grew up where there were more do's and don'ts, you heard about that more than God's love. And it's just left you with a lot of feelings like, what does God want from me? And is God just looking to just slap me, strike me down if I make a mistake? This Bible study is all about finding freedom and discovering how to live free from fear and fully alive with God's purpose and joy for your life. And so I'm going to be celebrating this on Tuesday, April 6th at 8 p.m., excuse me. So I will be talking about it over the next few weeks, but I just wanted to show off the cover. Tabitha, isn't the cover pretty?
It's beautiful.
Thank you. It's like, what else am I going to say? Well, and so, friends, I hope that you will join me on that date so we celebrate. So, Tabitha, as we wrap up, do we have any parting words from comments from our friends as we let go of today's show?
Yeah. Well, Kelly said, my husband often reminds me that my kids are alive and that is enough. And I love that. I think that's so powerful. It's like the little big things. Yeah.
Absolutely. Truly wonderful. Well, we are near the end of the show. Tabitha, do you want to say goodbye to everybody?
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for staying on, and I hope you learned a lot from today, and we will see you next Tuesday.